Well, good morning. It's Friday at 10, right on time. Um, just to let you know, we're having some weird things happening with the stream. It ended early on Wednesday, and then for some reason, decided to kick back on for 22 and a half hours. And then we tried to troubleshoot that and fix it. And then it went on for at least like all day yesterday and all through the night. I don't know. It went on for an entire day. So I'm not sure. We're not sure what's happening or why. But I'm hoping that at the moment, at least, that this is actually streaming. It says it's live online. It says that it's streaming and recording, and the microphone is working. Anyway, yeah, the if you're seeing that this stream is like constantly on, it's because we don't know quite what's happening. Yeah. So, like I said, I hope that it's working when we want it to be on. If it's on when we don't want it to be on, well, that's another issue altogether, isn't it? So, yeah. That aside, I am continuing to work on the Savoia. Oh my. S.21. Then I really made an effort to clean up, and then things are just all over the place. This is the model complete with glare, the box top there. So 1/48th scale model of Porco Rosso's plane from the Miyazaki film Porco Rosso. These are the parts that I haven't started working on yet. You can see there's a lot of parts that I haven't started working on yet. I've been spending a lot of time working on just a few parts, very slowly and deliberately and cautiously. I'm trying to make a good model out of this, trying to do a really good high quality job. And so it's just taking a while. Wednesday was a little frustrating because I almost got the cart done, but it's put together. I got the metallic things highlighted, where the wheels attach and where the ropes attach and where the bracket holds it together, and I got it all washed and it looks good, and I did touching up. And then these bits on the top here are not wood. They're supposed to be like a cushion, a fabric cushion, maybe canvas or something. And the color of paint I thought I had, there was a jar there in the paint holder that was the right color. And when I opened it, there wasn't any paint in it. So I had to order some, and that won't be arriving until, I don't know, sometime between today and next Tuesday. So I'm going to continue plugging along on other things, other parts of the model. A little bit of painting, a bunch of sanding, part preps, that sort of thing. The big task today is this. This is the base, the hull of the model, I guess you'd call it, because it's a flying boat. So it's got a hull. And this is the inside, and the red part, the plane basically lifts up off the hull so you can see interior detail. It's a cutaway, kind of almost like the submarine, and some parts of the Apollo. So but it has circles molded into it. And so what I've been doing is trying to get rid of the circles so that they don't show. And I've been using epoxy because it is hard and can be sanded. And I got one of them fairly much gone. And so I thought, well, I'll do the rest. This one, anyway, it didn't work on this one. The epoxy came out of the little divot. So I'm going to be spending most of the day today sanding down these little bits of epoxy so that the circles are as invisible as I possibly can get them. That's what I'm going to attempt to do anyway. And so I'm going to try this 600 grit. I've been reluctant to use this because it could scratch the surface and then I have to polish out the scratches. I've been using 800, but it cuts very slowly. I'm just going to try this just to see if it's a good idea or a bad idea. And if it's a good idea, then I'll keep using it. And if it turns out to be a bad idea, then I will attempt to correct my error by sanding out the marks. I have to be kind of light on this. Like I said, on Wednesday, I had done these two. This one's kind of okay, not perfect. This one was coming along okay, and then I pulled the epoxy out of the divot, so it wasn't filling it in because it was gone. So attempting to, the epoxy raised up. Okay, it's above the surface. So I'm sanding down to the surface. Doing my best to just sand the epoxy lump and not sand everything else. I'm starting on these two because they are the least visible when the model is put together. They're kind of covered up. This is pretty good sandpaper, but it fills in quickly. It is the sanding dust gets into the abrasive and then it stops being abrasive. And if you were a nasty person, it would be good for you to stop being abrasive. But if you're sandpaper, you want to be nasty to the thing that you're sanding. You want to be abrasive. So anyway, I'm as you can see, this is tedious work, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more to go after this. So I might end up spending almost the entire stream doing nothing but sanding things down and trying not to make stupid jokes about abrasion. I only made one stupid joke about abrasion, so try to spare you anymore. Yeah, so I don't know what's going on with the stream. I do believe that it is actually streaming now because the little things on the messages on the monitor that I can look at, which I look at occasionally to make sure whatever I'm doing is still on camera. Okay, like that. This part here is on camera. But I don't know why there is a message saying that the stream had been on for an hour, a day, an hour, 10 minutes, and 25 seconds when there wasn't anything streaming other than the thank you for watching screen from Wednesday. I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of like ghost or something. Maybe this has been possessed, and whatever it is wants attention, and so it doesn't stop streaming. Really have no idea. No. There's less epoxy there than I started. This is going to be one of those things where I better come up with a decent monologue because saying, oh, look, I'm sanding that down. Oh, that edge came along. This edge isn't at all. I have to sand over on this side. Maybe I should sand over the front and the back. I don't know. It's not even. What's happening here? Isn't it even? Why is it not sanding as quickly as it was before? Well, because there's more surface area. I was just doing the very top of the dome, and now I'm down into it where it's the entire diameter of the circle. It's still raised above it. Sand it too quickly because I don't want the patch to pull out. I could, you're going to be hearing stuff like that if I don't come up with a good monologue topic. I'm not prepared. This is, this is something I shouldn't have to be doing. If the injection molding process didn't put obnoxious little circles in places where they were showing, then I wouldn't have to be spending all this time doing this, and I'd be much further along in the whole construction process. But they're in places where they're highly visible, and it's just really annoying. They should not be there. Okay, well, this is coming along slowly. I haven't pulled the patch out yet. Hoping what I could do, you can see on this side, I have a silicon carbide stuff that polishes, and it doesn't. Anyway, if I can get this down to the surface, then I'll polish it with that, and then it will look like this side, which is very close to the texture of the original plastic, which is good. Can't hear it, but there are my workbench. I'm not going to call it a studio because it's definitely not that. My workbench, which it definitely is in the basement, and the microphone is set up to filter out extraneous sounds like the heat pump is pumping heat into the house because it's cold out here today. You can't hear that. And then there's a humidifier on it, and the water runs through the humidifier, and some of it evaporates and some of it doesn't, and the water that doesn't evaporate goes into this little sump pump thing, and then the sump pump thing, when it gets full, turns on and makes a whirring noise, and you can't hear that. And then people start moving around upstairs, and they're making sounds, and I don't know what they are. It was, usually it's just getting up and making coffee and getting ready to do other stuff. But today it was a sound you didn't hear. It was just this weird noise. It was, I hope that's okay. That was my take on it. I could only think of, I hope that was okay. Well, this is coming along okay here. Maybe if I turned it over, I would get a better, if one side is getting sanded down and the other side isn't, just turn it over, right? Like it's getting really close to being pretty good. At least better than it was. It would go faster if I could do it in a circular fashion, but this is supposed to be wood, and I want, if there's scratch marks on it, then I want them to go in this direction, like what the grain of the wood would be. Um, well, yeah, so weeks ago I was talking about old cars. Yeah, so maybe I'll talk about them again. Some of you might be old enough to remember cars that had carburetors, right? If you don't know what that is, you'll have to look it up online, go to a reputable source. I think Wikipedia probably tells the truth about carburetors. And I was reminiscing about the compared to nowadays. Used to be, this was a used to be thing. It used to be that there was a tremendous amount of maintenance involved. And we didn't even think about it at the time. It was just that's how cars were. You had weird stuff on cars that you don't have anymore, like distributor caps. What what is a distributor cap? What could a distributor cap even do? What does it distribute? Well, what it distributed was it distributed the electricity from the alternator to the spark plugs, which was which was done mechanically. Okay, electronic ignitions, but this was done mechanically, and the way it worked is that it was essentially a pointer. I'll just call it that. It was a pointer that polished up okay. I have to get more of this. This is really good. It doesn't clog up. It cuts pretty quickly. It polishes the plastic really nicely. Can still see the circle. I'm not sure how much it's actually going to show when it's painted. And it's in some ways it's almost gone, and in other places it's still there. Anyway, yeah, you had these weird things called distributors, and it was basically a spinner. It spun around and made contact with things called points, which were little raised bumps, and the electricity went through the spinner like the hand on a clock. And it went through that, and when it made contact with the little spots, there were 4, 6, or 8 of them, one for each cylinder. It would send the electricity through that little spot, through the wire to the spark plug. And they wore out. You'd expect that because it was mechanical, and it was based on contact. Okay, so the spinner and the points were rubbing against each other all the time. And because of that, they wore out. And if it wasn't making contact, then you'd like maybe a cylinder would just not fire or something. That could happen. And so those things needed to be changed out all the time. That was part of the routine maintenance of a vehicle, was to points and plugs. Yeah, plugs too. Spark plugs. You don't even think of those anymore. I think you get changed out like once every millennium, practically. But it used to be that you needed to change those spark plugs pretty often. And if you wanted to save money, you wouldn't change them. You'd pull them out and clean them, because they'd have buildup from the fuel, especially the leaded part of the fuel that would build up on them. And you'd have to file that off. And then the spark plug has, like the spark comes from an emitter and goes down to this little, it was a kind of a L-shaped piece of metal on the bottom of it that collected it. Didn't go anywhere. It just stayed inside the spark plug. But the idea was to make a spark, and the spark ignited the fuel in the cylinder. Anyway, the spark plugs got clogged up, but that gap between the two, the part where the spark sparked, the gap there, that had to be precise. And so there were instruments that were made, little shims, little pieces of metal that would let you get the gap exactly right. There's that spot just right there on the inside. I'm not getting to it somehow. It's part of routine maintenance, and nowadays the spark plugs last seemingly forever. And I don't know of anybody who tries to save them, save money by taking them out and adjusting the gap by just bending that little piece of metal so that it was just right. That might be something that has disappeared in the passage of time. You probably can go to like an antique store or something and maybe find the instruments that were used to set the gap on spark plugs. That might be a fun kind of historical thing to do. Where an automotive museum might have those. But that was part of just routine maintenance. Had to change those out, either one way or the other, get them to the specifications that they needed to be. So points and plugs, the points were the little contact things, those were out. That was done pretty routinely. You just go in and tune up the engine. And the timing of all of that had to be just perfect too. Otherwise, the cylinders wouldn't fire at the right time, and you could not only just lose power, but you could hurt your engine in a significant way too. So that was all, pretty skilled stuff that needed to be done. And some people just learned how to do it themselves because it was, the least expensive way of doing something that was routine. Mufflers used to go out all the time. We had to replace mufflers constantly because the materials weren't as good then. I'm thinking that looks okay. I'm going to go on to this next one. It's raised above the surface just a little bit. So it's like a bump. But I don't know. It isn't that is not even getting sanded. This is the part that's annoying. It's just the last bits of trying to get it feathered, basically. So you can see the shininess of it there, just around this edge here. And what that means is that that's part of the epoxy that has not been in contact with the abrasive. And that's the part that's most likely to show. And when I run my finger over it, I can feel that there's a little bump there. This other side is pretty good, but this side just, it's not coming along. Don't know quite what's happening there. The finer point. Oh, sorry, yeah. Car parts. Spark plugs, points. Sometime, the clock hand that rotated. Okay, that didn't wear out as quickly, but that was all part of the distributor cap, and sometimes that had to be replaced too because that wore out. Wherever you got friction going. I think maybe I messed that up. We'll go on to the next one, see how well I can do here. So those are all things that needed to be done, and just cars just needed attention all the time. And that kind of thing needed to be done at least once a year. You'd do the tune-up, which was, ooh, that's got a raised edge. I need to be careful not to sand that off. So you'd get your points and your plugs, any parts that wore out most quickly. Mufflers just were not made out of the same materials now. You can drive a car for like 10 years and never replace a muffler, maybe longer. Back in the day, it used to be that replacing a muffler after the original went bad, probably like after 2 years or something, it would be, unless you got the most expensive muffler, which would then maybe last a year, you'd be looking at least once a year replacing a muffler because those would rot out. With a muffler, you always knew when it was time to replace it because it stopped muffling, right? Started making a very, very loud noise. And then the rest of the exhaust system would wear out too. There's a little tailpipe that hung out the back of the muffler. So I learned all about this because all these things had to be replaced on our cars. So behind the muffler was the tailpipe, which was usually a little piece, and that sometimes you just did that at the same time that the muffler got replaced. It's just a thing. Then the exhaust pipe, you know, you'd expect your exhaust to have an exhaust pipe. The exhaust pipe went between the crossover pipe and the muffler. And that would usually rot out, after a few years. That would have to be replaced. That was more expensive because it was a bigger piece of pipe and, it was not sold en masse. But then if you were in real trouble, your crossover pipe would go bad. And what that was, those came off the manifold. I mean, the exhaust coming right out of the engine, out of the manifold, would go into that crossover pipe, and it essentially combined the exhaust from all of the cylinders into one pipe. So I learned about that, by having to have it replaced. So this one car of ours, the entire exhaust system was replaced at least once. Muffler, I think the exhaust pipe twice. Mufflers probably 8 or 9 times. It seemed like we're always getting a muffler. Vitus muffler, Lentz muffler. There were, shops that were essentially devoted to replacing mufflers because it was such a common thing. Cars would be in there all the time, making noise coming in and being quiet going out. That was the point. The materials got better, and some mufflers didn't need to be replaced as often. But that was, as I sometimes rant about, another one of those job killing things. That we don't think about. Everybody hears about job killing this or job killing that, or, this is going to destroy an industry, and we can't do it because, people will lose their employment. But think about what happened when, instead of everybody having to replace a muffler once a year, nobody's replacing a muffler ever. I mean, that had a major impact. Kind of working backward, the people who made a living replacing mufflers weren't doing that anymore. What did they do? Their job got killed. And what about the people who were making all those mufflers? And what about the people who were moving those mufflers from the place where they made them to the places where they were installed? And then the people who were, all the way up the line to the mining of the raw materials. All of that employment was affected by not having to replace your muffler every year. But there never was any political movement about that. There was never any save our muffler jobs movement. Why not? Why wasn't there a save our muffler jobs movement? I don't know. The same thing with distributor caps. Once electronic ignition came in, the whole distributor cap industry collapsed, except for for antique cars, where somebody's probably still making them somewhere, somehow, so that you can keep your antique car going. spark plug gap measurers. Just a little raised button there now. It's gone from a divot to a little raised spot. And what to do about that? I thought it's kind of feathered around the edges, but instead of a divot, there's a lump there, and the lump isn't disappearing. I knew this was going to take forever. But I want this to look good, and it doesn't look good with circles where there shouldn't be circles. So, the whole muffler industry collapsed, the distributor cap industry collapsed, the spark plug gap measuring, I don't know how much of an industry there was, but there were a lot of those around. A lot of people had the little gap things. Yeah, those changes were huge, and they just sort of happened. It's like, oh, well, we don't have distributor caps anymore. Our carburetors, whoa, our carburetors, those were both amazing and awful. We have fuel injection now, where the air and the fuel are mechanically, electronically controlled and injected directly into the cylinders, but that isn't how it used to work. We used to have carburetors because the fuel air mixture had to be mixed. And so the carburetor was the place where the air and the fuel came together. And were mixed, hopefully in the right proportion, to facilitate effective combustion in the cylinders. Well, there were little nozzles in the carburetor where the fuel came in, and the air came in, just right through the top. And the air fuel mixture needed to be different under different conditions. Like when the engine first started and it was cold, you wanted a little more fuel and a little less air, and then later on, when the engine was warm and you were moving along, you could get by with less fuel and a little more air in the ratio anyway. Okay, well, this is getting closer to what I wanted. Our carburetor never worked on our first car. It just didn't. There's this thing called a butterfly valve. The butterfly valve was just that. It was just a flap on the top of the carburetor that opened and closed, admitting either more or less air. The same fuel came in each time. That wasn't controlled. The fuel jet just came in as it did, but the butterfly valve controlled the amount of air that came in, so that's how the air fuel mixture got adjusted. And there was this thing called a choke. The choke, choked the engine basically when it was closed. It reduced the amount of air that was flowing in. And it was supposed to be activated by a spring kind of mechanism that was supposedly controlled by the engine temperature, and that never worked. So the butterfly valve never worked, and so the air-fuel mixture never was right. Older cars had manual chokes. Essentially, there was a little cable that went from the butterfly valve through the firewall into the engine, into the passenger compartment where the driver could open or close the butterfly valve. That worked, unless the cable broke, which was not likely. Unless the cable broke, the manual choke worked. The automatic choke, which was supposed to save you the trouble of having to pay attention to, your fuel air mixture while you were driving, I'll just say that never worked. But then carburetors disappeared, and then there became fuel injection. And so the entire carburetor industry, except for like antique cars or NASCAR, which kept carburetors going for way longer than they were actually used in passenger cars. Let me polish that now. I think it's certainly better than it was. But yeah, that's, when you're thinking about older cars and then the massive changes that happened right up the late 50s until the 70s, a lot of these things just went from being an exotic thing, like fuel injection was an exotic thing in the 1950s, to everybody's got it. Just gradually whole industries disappeared. And all the jobs got killed. But nobody is mourning the passing of the distributor cap industry. But I'll do that now. Let us all mourn the passing of the carburetor, distributor cap, muffler, points and plug industries. Give them their due. But cars were really, people paid a lot of attention to the innards of their cars back then because they did it themselves or they had somebody else do it for them. But if it wasn't being done, the car would just not run. So just a lot more effort. I don't think we always appreciate now because we're just so used to it. All the stuff we don't have to do on our car. All the people who used to do car stuff who don't do car stuff anymore. I really hope this is worthwhile in terms of making these little circles, at least, if not invisible, at least not nearly so obtrusive, intrusive, annoying. Things that should never have been here to begin with. Well, if I get this done, I'll be able to prime it over the weekend. That'll be a good thing. And then I'll be able to paint it, do some painting on Monday. And then after these are painted, I'm going to do some washing on it to try to give it some, it's supposed to be wood. So I'm going to do some washing on it with a brown wash. I tested the colors here. This is the color, the base color. And then I tested 3 different washes to see which of them would make it look more wood-like, and brown beat umber and smoky. This is smoky. It gets, it gets fairly dark. And this is supposed to be much lighter, whatever kind of wood it is. Oh, so buttons. Why do I keep saying so? Anyway, I say anyway too. I have these words that I just keep saying for no particular reason, like anyway or so, that don't add anything anyway, so at all to the value of the stream. So maybe I'll so I try to. I'm going to try to stop saying those words. Let's see how successful I'm going to be. That's going to be the thing du jour here, is not saying anyway or so, or maybe cutting back on ums or us. Well, if I don't do that, then what am I going to say? There. Did it. It's like the knights who say me. Change it to it, and then they can't. I said it. Don't say it. That kind of thing. Except this isn't nearly as amusing as the knights who say me. Sorry about that. I'm trying. Whatever. So anyway, it was a total monologue failure there. Everything got said in what I was trying to not say. Yes, I am. Is this suddenly going at me? Using this polishing sandpaper and just getting some white spots here. I'm not sure what's going on. There, it's coming off. No, these are not too bad. I think this is kind of working. It's going to be better than it was. They're still going to show a little bit, but unless you're really looking for them, I'm going to encourage you not to be looking for them when this is done. It wouldn't be too bad. I'll do this one in the back. These are the ones that show the most up in front there. I'll take some extra time on those. These and these are here in the middle are covered up with something, with other parts. So as a result, they're not quite as sensitive. It's a little bit of a thing here. It's angled. It's to be done in 2 halves. And it globbed up in the middle. This is going to be a pain. Okay, well, just grind at it until it's acceptable. It's all that can be done. Makes sense to maybe try to use the needle files, but they just gouge the plastic too much. And then polishing out the marks turns out to be a real chore. Even more of a chore than this, which is clearly a chore. Trying to pay attention to what I'm doing here as opposed to paying attention to what I'm muttering on about. Okay. Yeah, so old cars, tires didn't last as long. Just everything didn't last as long. There was a lot of things that just routinely, not just because of an accident or because of whatever, just routinely needed to be replaced. Spark plugs, points, mufflers, distributor caps. It was pretty common to have to replace a lot of belts. The belts would get the material would become non-pliable and start to crack. And then the belt would break, and then whatever it was driving, the alternator, the power steering, the more stuff that got onto a car, the more belts there were. And if the belt broke, then that thing stopped working, and that wasn't good. And belts broke fairly often. It was, if you look at a busy road, at least once a month, you just see a broken belt in the gutter, or sometimes right in the middle of it, because they would break with quite frequently. Oh, I don't know. I don't know if anybody even thinks about their belts on their car anymore. It's usually just one now instead of maybe four, as it was with, in terms of design. The main belt was the timing belt, which kept all the cylinders running at the right times and all. If that went, then you could bust your engine. Just really mess it up. After that, there was the water pump, which kept the coolant moving through the radiator. That was important, because then your car would overheat. And the alternator, which took the motion of the engine to generate electricity, which would run back to your battery, which would then run everything else. So it was essentially a battery charger. And if that broke, you could go for a while until your battery just discharged completely. And then when your battery was gone, then your car would stop, because there's no more electricity to trigger the spark plugs to explode the gasoline in the cylinders. Yeah, this one is taking a good long time. There's A lot of epoxy down here in the little gap. Thing here, I need to keep the sandpaper over the top of it and not run into the edge, because even though by running it into the edge it's smoothing it out, it also is potentially pulling it out. Whereas if I'm sanding it down over the top, then it's less likely to do that. Going from the center to the edge should work. What about car parts? Yeah, almost everything. It, everything everything just used to wear out faster. Almost like that epoxy didn't harden. Some things wore out that we don't even have anymore. So we don't worry about them wearing out because they're not there. Other things just wore out a lot faster. And that just added to the cost of maintenance. So a lot of, the biggest improvement in cars, and part of the reason they cost so much more, is that they don't have things that wear out quite like they used to. So even though the car up front is more expensive, over the long run, it's less expensive. Because you're not replacing all sorts of parts that don't exist anymore. You can see this hasn't happened before. There's a dark spot there, and that seems to be like epoxy that isn't quite hard. It's a raised area. It's to be sanded off, but gently, because I don't want to pull it out. I know when car prices just started soaring, I was, what is with this? But then, I wasn't visiting the muffler shop every year. I wasn't replacing all sorts of parts on the under the hood. That was another thing too. Yeah. So your car isn't working right. So what do? You raise the hood, and then you look at it and you go, "What? There's nothing you can do." I mean, everything is electronically controlled, unless you've got a fluid that has run out, like you ran out of oil or something. There's not much you can do about it. It used to be. I joked about this, but it actually really was kind of true. If you had a wrench and a screwdriver, you could fix a lot of things. You'd open the hood and there were things you could do. You could replace the distributor cap. You could replace a belt. You could oftentimes see what the problem was. It would be visible. then you could do something about it. Now you can raise the hood, and all that is like help. It's just a help flag. No, what else? This old car, we replaced so many parts on our first car. Radiators, hoses, belts, universal joints. Just if it existed, it got replaced at some point. Yeah, the epoxy here didn't harden. It's getting a rough spot instead of. I'm not sure how that's going to look when it's painted. It's really hard to tell. I think it'll be better than it was. It's still kind of raised up. It's just, yeah, it's like, I'm not quite sure, not really sure quite what to do with this. Yeah. Yeah, these spots, they're still going to show. I'm just hoping that it isn't quite as obvious as it was before. Here, it's just getting the contours right. I have to be a little careful not to push too hard on here, because then what I will do is I'll snap the tail off, right? I'll just break it right here. Yay, that would be bad. No, I'm going to leave that alone now. I'll work on these ones up front. Yeah, so I'm going to be spending, obviously, most of today sanding down epoxy blobs. What will I do after this? I did, I'd really like to have finished a cart and at least say, oh, I've done something, something's finished. But that's not happening because paint wasn't, the paint I had didn't have paint in it. It was just a jar that was mostly empty. So the lesson of Wednesday was, if you've done careful inventory of the paints that you need for your model. And you've ordered the ones that you don't have because you know that you don't have them because they're not there, right? To order the ones you don't have, it's not enough to just check to make sure you don't have them. One also needs to open the jars of the paints that you think you do have, because there might not be any usable paint in the jar. And that's what happened with Deck Tan XF 55 Deck Tan. So I said, oh, I've got that. But I had an empty jar of it. It wasn't really empty. It still had residual paint in it, but it was totally unusable. It was just this gummy sediment on the bottom of the bottle. Obviously, it had been used for something and pretty much just used up. It's in order. And I need that to finish the cart. And Porco Rosso's flight suit is also that color. There's these little bits here. These little bits there get painted green. And I do have that color. So when I'm done with this, and I say so a couple more times, and I say whatever once or twice, even though I said I'm going to try to not say those things, I'm going to probably say them. And then, since this is going to be ready to be primed, these parts here in the box have little bits of the sprue left on them. And just, some flaws. Some places there's little circles on some spots that shouldn't have circles on them, of course, because they're injection molded models. And so, of course, they've got circles on them where you don't want to have circles. To sand and file those down after I'm done with this, so that the things that are ready for priming, well, the things that can be primed are ready to be primed. And then I'll paint those. If there's time left, I'll do that. Getting a little impatient on this one. This is one I shouldn't be impatient about. of all of them, this one is the one that shows the most. Well, that's the plan anyway, is to finish sanding this so that it looks okay. Then after that, those pieces, the ones that are here. And then after that, paint the radiators. And after that, it should be time to wrap up. And as a reminder to everybody, I am planning now for the stream to go from 10 until 1 with oftentimes no break. And if there is a break, like there might be fairly soon, just a little sort of a bio thing. Drop stuff. Hadn't dropped anything yet today. Had to get that over with. Get kind of a bio break and then get back to work. So pretty much looking at the schedule permanently changing now from 10 until 1. Whether or not there will be any change in the social media announcements for all of this or not, I don't know. I think that at some point the screen would match reality, but sometimes not. Raised button there. I can feel it. It's a bump. Let me get the other one on the other side to look kind of like this and then come back to it and see if I want to do anything more with it. Auto body putty again. The circle has turned into a little bump. Any bits of adjustment. I guess I'll polish that again. This one's got a lot of epoxy on it. This one's going to take a fair amount of time to get down to where it should be. So I'm getting that down to where it should be, which is taking a while. What else about old cars? Just about everything on it, though, wore out. About the only thing that I can think of, other than the seats, right? The steering wheel or things like that, but mechanical parts that didn't wear out any faster than they do now, I think, are windshield wipers. Windshield wipers lasted about as long then as they do now. At least that's my recollection in terms of how frequently they were changed. Oh yeah, radiator coolant. So the some people just drove with water in their radiators. Well, put it this way, like during the summer, I'll start over. It was a common thing at least once a year to flush the radiator and the cooling system. Okay. And the reason for that was that the antifreeze didn't last. The chemicals in it basically broke down, and it was risky to use it for more than 1 year. And it was important because if you lived in a place where it got below freezing, a lot of places do, if it got below freezing, the water in your radiator would freeze, and then the water would expand, and something would go. It would expand and push against something and break it. And if you were really lucky, all it would do is maybe bust a hose. You'd burst a hose or a hose connection or something. Then you just have to replace that after it got liquid again. So if you started your car and your coolant was frozen solid, you could really, really destroy your engine, and that was not a good thing. So antifreeze, which we don't think of as that much anymore, it's just engine coolant, right? Antifreeze was a thing that you added to the water in your radiator. And the chemicals in it that kept it from freezing, or the chemical itself, sort of broke down into other less effective antifreeze chemicals. And so it was a good idea to flush the radiator, which also got rid of like residue, and I don't know where the residue inside came from. Hard water, whatever. So all of that got washed away, and one replaced the coolant to water mixture with fresh stuff so that your engine didn't literally freeze during winter. That was kind of a regular thing to do. And it was one of the more important things that, might not be thinking of. You don't think of your radiator, you think about your muffler, because if that went, you definitely know it. But that was another thing that needed to be changed all the time. Going from front to back, the belts and hoses, the hoses too, those would deteriorate. You look under the hood, because he did that periodically, right? Look under the hood to check the oil, because the oil burned and leaked more than it does now. Every time, it used to be, you go to the service station, not the filling station, it was the service station. You'd go there, and you weren't allowed to touch the pumps. That was done by somebody who came out and filled your car with gas, and then they always check the oil because the oil did burn and leak. So it was important to keep the oil at the right level. Of course, that was an opportunity for them to the little dipstick that went into the oil reservoir. It's a great opportunity to bring the stick back and show you that your oil was down a quart. You could make it look like it was down a quart by you putting the dipstick out. Always had to wipe it off because the oil had been splashing around on the inside of the car, right? That's how it worked. They didn't put it quite down all the way. Oil showed low on the dipstick, and then you could sell a quart of oil. It was upselling. The service attendant, because it was a service station, while the gas pump was pumping, would check your oil and clean your windshield. And didn't even ask for any money for cleaning your windshield. It was all part of the service. Things like people didn't always pump the gas until the tank was full. The service attendant would come out and say, "Fill her up." It was always say, "Fill him up." Nobody said fill him up. Just fill her up. I don't know why that was. It's kind of weird when you think about it, but not going to think about it here. But they would say, "Fill her up." Go, "No, just give me $3 worth," because you could only get as much gas as you had money. Didn't have credit cards. Unless you got a credit card from the brand of gas that you were using, and then you were always trapped with that brand. And those were pretty rare, so it'd be fill her up, and it was, no, just give me so much, and then they would pump the gas until the not the gas monitor part of the pump, but the dollar amount showed. There was always the opportunity for scamming them too. We used to do a regular drive back and forth along expressways, and the expressways didn't connect. It was kind of weird. Had to take a 5-mile jaunt from one expressway to the other. It was a north-south road connecting the two east-west expressways, so always got gas there. It was at a Purple Martin. I don't know if Purple Martins even exist anymore. I don't think so. So I could talk about them without any kind of risk to the stream here. Saying things about the Purple Martin. Anyway, we'd stop at the Purple Martin, and it was a service station. It wasn't a self-service like things are now. Say yes, fill her up. The guy there, and I just had to laugh. It was just so dumb, right? Like people couldn't read the gas pump, but his assumption was that only he could read the gas pump, that the passengers or the driver in the car couldn't read the pump, so didn't know what was going on. So the pump said something like $4.87, right? You can laugh about that, but that's what it was to fill up, $4.87, something like that. And he'd come up and he'd get this stupid look on his face and say, $5. So he just, and I was like, whatever. I'm not going to argue about 13 cents. Even then, when 13 cents, was almost worth arguing about, you could just see the look of triumph in his face as he took the city slicker for 13 cents at the gas pump. It's pretty sad and funny at the same time. Anyway, yeah. Oh, I said anyway again. That's my gas pump story. The guy was pretty thrilled. He took the city slicker driving by for 13 cents. Well, if that's what you need to do to get 13 cents, I guess that's what you need to do to get 13 cents. But I was at once, it's like, really, you had to do this? And it was, yeah, he really did. That can't happen anymore because you pump your own gas, and if you pay 13 cents more than the pump says you should pay, that's on you. Okay, well, the problem here, this one worked really well, but this side, again, the epoxy looks like it didn't quite set all the way. So it's not polishing like it should, but it's not too bad. What kind of a bump there? Really gentle. Up the edges here. I have to say that I don't think I'm going to get it any better than that. And that I'm hoping that when all is said and done, that it'll look better than it would have if I hadn't attempted to fill in the circles. But it's just anything, I just can't get it any better. I can't improve it. And so it is what it's going to be. This isn't good back here. I'm going to try to get this bit better back on the tail. The only thing that would work potentially better than the epoxy, it's just not as hard as it should be, is auto body putty. And I've used that, but it dissolved the plastic. And that wasn't good because then it filled the hole, but then it marred the surface all around it. I'm gonna just worry away at this a little bit. I don't know what happened the other day. Hi, thanks for dropping in. Um, we're having some problems. Things cut out kind of early on Wednesday, uh, and you're working on fauna again because I thought you were coming up with a different character for the new game. But tell me more about fauna. And yeah, there's weird things happening. We had it kind of cut out early on Wednesday, and then the stream just kept going for like 24 hours. There was nothing on other than the thanks for watching screen. And then we thought we got it fixed yesterday, but it looks like it went for another day and an hour or so. Trying to get these mold marks, these circles, sanded out. And yeah, it's coming along kind of. Not very well, but kind of. I filled them with epoxy, and the epoxy didn't harden as hard as it should have been hard. Oh, okay. Right, because you were working on a dryad. I know that. So that's how your dryad was created. Demoted. Okay, is it? I guess that's a demotion. Yeah. Right, because we were talking, I remember we were talking about because the dryad is bound to a tree. Right. Flora got animals and fauna got plants. No. Yes, exactly that. But I remember we were talking about how how you would deal with keeping your tree with you because that was, you're a dryad and you can't be away. Right. Flora got animals, fauna got plants. So it's just the opposite of the way the way the words usually work. I remember things, sort of, sometimes. Like I know where I am. I'm oriented to time and place, kind of, mostly. So what's the latest developments with fauna? Oh, the other thing I remember is that her appearance changed with her mood, and her mood changed with the seasons. That was something you were working on, is trying to decide what mood went with what season. How has that been going? Pretty well. It's good to have antlers. Oh, I got wind and earth. Okay. Water and fire. Where I got the opposites. Flora should be interesting. Oh, yeah, that's probably good. You don't want to complicate things too much. But is her appearance still going to change with moods, or is her appearance going to stay stable now? More importantly, how is she going to? We you were talking about her carrying her tree as like a plotted potted plant, yeah, on her back. Okay. I think that's a good idea to have the moods change one's appearance. Actually, that happens with people, right? With different facial expressions and such. So that's, it sounds like, I mean, that would make sense that that would happen. Well, you develop the backstory then further. That's cool. Let me get, I haven't used this before. I'm going to get some different sandpaper here. Finish the polishing. Okay. So that's the story. Is the 1500 is good. Yeah. I mean, if you were an archfey, you're definitely more powerful than if you've been demoted to druid. Not druid, dryad. Whoa. Okay. That was a showing my age there. So her sister, is her sister going to make an appearance in the game or just part of her backstory? Those of you who are not watching chat, we're talking about the creation of a D&D character, a dryad who used to be an archfey, who got demoted because she decided to, take up with a mortal. That was not something that they do. Yeah, how's your DM been reacting to the character? I think the character development is coming along really well, and I hope your DM appreciates it. No, woodsman, definitely woodsman. That's my opinion. I'm going to express a firm opinion to not go with the cliche, but go with the sad irony of a woodsman. Of course, if it's a toss up, you could just do it that way. Oh, I'm sure you can do whimsical. You know, you don't have to be squeaky to be whimsical or anything like that. You can be. It's just your choice of words. A lot of puns and things like that. Oh my. Um, I didn't know that. So your DM was injured in the storm, enough to be in the hospital. That's pretty scary. I didn't realize that. I know that you had gotten through it pretty well. Didn't know that one of your player friends. Wow. Is there any other family, any DM family you could contact to see how they're doing? Well, that fell on the floor. Okay. This is now. I have to say it's probably as good as it's going to get. I don't know if I'd made the circles disappear completely, but they're going to be much less obvious than they were before. I can't, especially up here in the front where there's just little bumps. I can't feel them as much as I did. So I'm going to say this is just how it's going to be uh, before it's primed and painted. Okay, I'm going to prep these pieces. Get these pieces ready to prime, and then the Porco Rosso figure, sitting down Porco Rosso figure after that. No, you can't see it all, but I've managed to make a mess on the workbench again because that's what I do. All right, so this piece has some sprue attached to the outside here and here, a little bit right on the tip here, and then there are mold mark circles here and here, and it's an indentation. It looks stupid. I'm going to file that down. I don't think that will be a problem in terms of the way it will end up looking. This is a pretty fragile piece. No, I know. I don't. Same thing here. You don't want to give out personal stuff. I was just concerned that you've got a friend who might have been hospitalized because of the hurricane, and hopefully they're all right. Yeah, I've been told to be careful about anything personal here. I have to remain vague, like I live in Michigan. Okay, not give out an address. Of course, it's kind of silly to say that, but yeah, you have to nowadays. Maybe it's always been that way. Always needed to be careful. It just seems like we all need to be more careful now than we used to be. Another used to. Hope everybody's okay. I know that was a horrible storm. I imagine there's still people without power in the state. I haven't seen the news about it lately. After it got down under a million, the national news didn't seem to care anymore. But has power been restored pretty well? There's still places without it. That can be. We are so dependent on electricity. It's actually kind of scary when when you think about it, so I try not to think about it. Still some flooding that it hasn't cleared yet? Wow. Yeah, the national news just moved on. It was, oh yeah, there was flooding and power's out, and now no one seems to care much about what's going on in Florida in the aftermath of the storm, except maybe the insurance companies, but we haven't heard much. So being without power, that's a long, long time. And the flooding is, what do you do then? No, seriously, it's the, what's this, 800? Yeah. Anything that absorbs water, carpeting, certainly drywall, all of those kinds of things just become not just trash, but dangerous trash because they start growing mold and bacteria and things. And so it's so important to clean up right away and get the stuff out of there. And then it's got to go somewhere. And we don't think about that. Like, we need a big truck to haul this rotting stuff away. Times you don't get them. What's this? So the national news went on and on with great disappointment about how the storm surge was only like 8 or 10 feet instead of 15 or 18 feet. Like, oh dear, we didn't set a record for a storm surge. Like, that was a bad thing. Oh, geez, it still hasn't drained yet. My brother had a yard kind of like that. It was, there was a low spot, and the soil was clay. And so if there was spring melt up here where there's snow, so all the snow had to melt. And if it melted really fast, like if it went from cold to hot pretty quickly, what would happen? And then there's usually rain, right? So there would be rain, the snow would melt really fast, and there would be probably not as much as yours, but yeah, that's another thing is if the internet goes down. Used to be that there was no such thing as internet, so we weren't. Oh no. Yeah. So their drain didn't work. Your yard got flooded, and they're just fine. That's the fairness of it. So yeah, I bet your mom is really ticked off. And where does the water go? Right? It just, like you said, you have to wait for it to evaporate. Eventually, it evaporates, but then you hope that whatever is left is not toxic or anything like that. You probably have to do a bunch of landscaping then to fix it all. These parts shouldn't be here. These parts should be here. I'm going to make a mess of them. Yeah. Our power went out once. It was out for 3 days. Okay. We were kind of lucky. We had gotten a generator, so we were able to stay in the house, and we didn't lose our refrigerated stuff or anything like that. But the internet also went out, and I'm not really sure why, except maybe the power went out to the nearest cell tower or something. Anyway, yeah, it went out, and it was, well, what do you do? We become so dependent on it for just keeping our time, filling our time. Okay, well, this should be a simple thing. It's just a flat surface. You can see the shiny spot in the center. That's one of those holes, and this is supposed to be wood and metal, and it doesn't have little holes like that. That is an artifact, 100% artifact of the molding, injection molding process. And they are the bane of my modeling existence. Okay, I'm just filing this whole surface down quite a lot, like a 128th, maybe even a 64th of an inch or something, fraction of a millimeter, but still, I want that divot to disappear. So I'm filing the whole surface down to that. Yeah, once the water evaporates, you're going to have like that cracked mud surface that you see. You see pictures of lakes and rivers or something that dried up, and you get that crackly mud, and the mud is, oh yeah, I don't envy you cleaning that up. Sometimes that stuff gets really hard too, so you have to get a rototiller or something like that to break it all up and get it ready to replant with something. Hmm. You think it was Flores? Oh, well, Fauna's the one who fell in love with the human, right? So do you think it was Flora who like told on her, or um, got the Fey authorities involved? Siblings will do that, right? The evil, no, not an evil sister. Maybe just chaotic. Maybe just jealous. Although having, an evil sister isn't all that bad. It's kind of like everybody, right? I'm having to remove a lot of plastic to get rid of this circle. Fortunately, it's a pretty thick piece. There's one back here too. It isn't quite as deep. Fortunately, there's also a lot of plastic to work. Important for me though is to file off only this bit and not everything around it. I'm using the file on it. I'll polish it later, but there's so much that has to come off. And I really need to use the file. Yeah, Fae really aren't evil. They're just I don't know. Is their morality is sort of different? Maybe. I mean, we would consider them to do bad things, but they're not. They don't consider it to be bad. It's a. Fae is just a real different planar kind of thing. The Zoria Ansul, the changeling druid, was not born Fey, but was raised Fey and studied it and has taken on Fey magic. Hi, Ole. I am now your Discord friend. Thank you for the invitation. Looking at some of the chat. It's in Danish. I couldn't read it. It was like, oh, okay, well, I understand why, but we in the States are just so, we're not illiterate. We're just, well, that's perfectly fine. I appreciate the effort. And we in the States are terrible. We just, we don't take other languages seriously. I guess I'll say that. You know, I'm not even sure it's true anymore, but it used to be that in high school there was a requirement to take a foreign language in many high schools. And what that turned into for almost everybody was 1 year of Spanish, because Spanish was, well, there weren't very many alternatives because there weren't anybody around. There wasn't anybody around to teach languages, you know, who knew languages. Seriously, you couldn't, it was hard to, in many places. Well, when I was in school, which was quite a while ago, I'm sure it's different now, it was hard to get um, competent Spanish teachers. So our high school offered, yeah. So you grow up at least knowing, right, French and Spanish. That's what we got in our high schools, French and Spanish, exactly. The my kids were, and it's only lasted for a few years. They had one teacher who had spent a long time in Japan, wasn't Japanese, but spent a long time in Japan. So wasn't really fluent in Japanese, but could, you know, teach beginning. And so they actually were able in high school to take um, two full years of Japanese, and that was kind of cool. We ended up going to Japan. They found out that they knew nothing about the language compared to people who were, you know, native speakers. But it was, at least it wasn't just Spanish and French, which were the only two options that, like you said, that we had when I was in school, and a lot of people have now. But I know that in Europe, almost all of Europe, people are fluent in at least two, sometimes three languages minimum. And that's just the way it is, which makes it really fine for, only people in Denmark speak Danish, of course. Well, you know, third hardest language, I absolutely totally believe that. Having seen it now, and not heard it, but seeing it on the Discord link that you sent, it looked really difficult. Um, I think our high school has German classes now. I'm not sure, but in the U.S., we're just so, I don't know what the right word is. It's just us, you know. We're really pretty selfish about it, and so we just don't learn other languages or take it seriously when we have the opportunity to learn them. My son and daughter-in-law live in Berlin, and in order to get, you know, to keep their work visas, they had to become somewhat fluent in German. So they took a year of ignorant, just, you know, self-centered, thoughtless. It's like, talk American, why don't you? You know, and then you see these weird things like on travel sites, people coming back their vacation in Spain, right? All these people just talked funny, talked in Spanish as though they were doing something wrong by speaking in a native language. They managed to get the circles out, so you can see now there is no circle and a circle here. Yeah, it turned out that oh yeah, is our Norwegian is okay. So this is our ignorance here. You'd think, there's Norway and Sweden and Finland, and you think, well, Norway and Sweden have, and probably Dutch maybe. Oh yeah, a lot of old Norse, and that. Okay, so there's a common root there, and which explains some of the similarity with German too. There's a lot of overlap. Took German in college. Went to Germany to visit our son. Thought we knew a little bit of German, and it's amazing how one can find out how little one knows about the language by just having taken a college course. Okay, so it's possible. Okay, for you to travel. Well, you do that. You'd go to Norway every year, right? That's one of your typical vacation spots. So it's almost like having, like we would say here, a dialect almost, where there's a significant difference in, say, pronunciation, but not necessarily the words or their meaning. Because, like, in the U.S., a really deep Southern accent, not not just Florida, but the heavy drawl, right, that you might get. Nowadays, it's less than that, but it used to be that the Southern accent, the Southern drawl, is almost like talking in English to someone from Scotland. I remember a trip in high school. We we I was on the debate team, right? So we went to a tournament in Florida and Miami, and drove there, and stopped at a restaurant in South Carolina, and really could not understand what what the person who greeted us was saying. Just the vowels, especially the vowels, were so different. Oh, okay. So if you realize that what what's happening. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's what happened to me in South Carolina. Is just had to speak slowly. One thing for us in the States, it's a very convenient thing, but I think it's also very unfair. Is that we get used to, not used to, but used to, um, people speaking English everywhere we go. And that was true. We took a cruise. Well, in Berlin, it's a little different. I'll explain why. But We took a cruise along the Norway coast last November to see the Northern Lights, and everyone on the ship spoke English, and even when we stopped in small little towns. Okay, well, we'll talk about fauna, but we'll talk about fauna in English, I guess. I I find that amazing. You're looking at a country with what, like 6 million people. For us, that's a big city. For a lot of the world, that's just like a big city. So it's a small country, and you've got 50 different dialects. I think that some people in the states here say that that's the case too. That you can tell where one comes from because of the way pronunciation is. But that's become less and less true as we've all started talking Midwest, because that's how people on the news do it. Well, when you get back, Enforcer, we'll talk more about fauna. Yeah, you can mostly you can tell. You can tell if people are kind of native. There are some places that take prides in their accents. The Boston or that kind of thing. Um, yeah, and so it'll become obvious where they're from. But more and more, what we're finding is that, especially in the cities, that there's been so much movement from one city to the other, where everybody has listened to the same voices on the TV, that some of the regional differences are much diminished. But yeah, you can sort of tell from where somebody is from by their accent. I think that we're kind of losing that regionalization. Someone, it probably would be hard to tell if someone is from Atlanta or Cedar Rapids. You know, might not be able to tell that there's much difference there, or noticeably. We know, like my daughter-in-law grew up in Los Angeles, and there's the jokes about the old Valley Girl kind of speech, but she and her family don't have they sound just like us here in the Midwest, or we sound just like them one way or the other. Spent some time in Chicago because we're fairly close to it, and you laugh about the Chicago accent, but so when you go to a place, okay, you can tell if they grew up in that place or not, or if they're a transplant from somewhere else, or just a visitor like you. So do people work at maintaining their different dialects? Is that something that just happens because that's where they are, or is that sort of a sense of place? People work at it, because I don't know in the States if people work at keeping their Southern drawl or not. Some might, or whether it just sort of disappears with the mixing that goes on in the country. So I've heard, I don't know if this is the case, that they don't. Yeah, they're just, that seems to happen here too. And then, you know, I know in England, in Britain, this that one's accent, I don't know, dialect, I guess it's a dialect, not only denotes where from Britain you might be from, but also your social status. So I think that there was in Britain a social discrimination almost based on one's dialect. Does that happen in Denmark too, or is it just it's just where you're from? That's how you learn. That's how you learn to talk there. Or is any kind of social um, status sort of thing that goes with it? I know here in the States that that kind of happens. The Southern drawl is not something that is, or historically at least, I don't know what it is now really, but I do remember growing up that the Southern drawl was not something that was prized up north. Sometimes it could be pleasant. Your wife doesn't speak either one of them. The size of pretty much a smallish kind of town, and two different dialects that was maintained. That's just kind of fascinating that in a big city you'll hear a lot of accents because of people. A lot of people, English isn't their first language. Okay, they're from other places, other countries, and so you'll hear different accents, but not very many different dialects anymore. So were there social issues, like social status issues associated with different dialects? Or is it just a you're not one of us kind of thing? I'm just curious about whether that happened. Because sometimes that happens, that dialects are a sign of like otherness. Well, really? That many? Okay. That the island doesn't support a high school anymore. I could talk about schools here in the States. It's really different. A lot of rural areas, especially up north here, are becoming depopulated. They really are. There's just nothing. There isn't any real good farming. Logging isn't really much of a thing anymore. They might not have had any manufacturing other than as necessary to keep something going. Some other like machine shops or something like that to keep machines running. And so a lot of places, smaller towns, are becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. But one thing that they'll do is they'll hang on to their schools. Even I was just reading about one place they're having trouble finding teachers because they've got fewer than a dozen students in the whole school. And one teacher is basically teaching elementary school, and the other one is teaching middle school. And there's just tremendous political opposition to closing down and consolidating school districts. Part of it is distances too, though. The a small town, the nearest high school, if they were to consolidate, may end up being something like 50 miles away. And kids are looking at being on a bus, if they have a bus, an hour each way every day. And that's not something that's valued. Okay, so these pieces here are ready to be primed. And then I do have the color, the correct paint color for this and this. Let me see. I want to see the color chart for these folks. 40 is gray. Okay, the little struts are painted gray. 19 is the main color. Yeah, the main color for all of that. This is metal. Okay, so the strut across here is metal. The rest of this is wood, and I'm guessing this is supposed to be metal too. It's not noted that way. 44 is the color I don't have. 19 is deck. Okay, so this is supposed to be painted the deck tan, which is the kind of canvasy color that's supposed to go on here and here. But the rim of it, the edging around it is wood. So it's like wood supporting canvas, kind of. I got that. This is center. I wonder if those are supposed to be metal or just painted gray. I'm not sure. And then the whole frame of it is painted the wood color. I'm glad I'm looking at this. And these guys, these little radiator guys that are here, here, okay. Those are supposed to be painted. Why am I muttering to myself about these different colors? Well, because there it is. 17 green. Okay, they're green. Ta-da. So the way this goes, oh my. It's always somebody stealing the young women. You have to steal the women. Um, so there was a feud between the two halves of the islands around that's it sounds like something that would happen in some of the rural areas of our country. Trying to figure out where these go. This looks like it goes here. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense because those have little openings in the bottom to go around that. It is not at all clear where those radiators go or how. I always find it helpful to these parts. 20, of course it did. 20 years of feuding. We of course have the famous Hatfield and McCoys. I don't know how long that feud went on. It was kind of like that. It went on forever and ever and ever. Um, but it was the same sort of thing where there was two families in the mountainous regions, the Appalachians, I think, decided that for some reason they didn't like each other. Somebody offended someone, and they they had a feud that went on for at least that long. It was just shooting, and people were killed in the feud. And of course, if someone's killed or injured, then they had to get retribution, and so that just kept going and going. I thought this was straightforward, but it's kind of okay. So this goes way up in front, and then these little radiator things go. There's little slots there that are barely visible that go there. So this whole thing is supposed to be mainly wood, okay, including the framework here. The frame of this looks like it's wood with a canvas insert, kind of. I don't know what those holes are for. I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something to them to just highlight them. Maybe paint them metallic or something. I'm not sure. I'll have to look ahead in the instructions to see what's supposed to go there. And then this is mainly the wood color with some metallic struts in it, and then the radiators go up in there. So it's like a natural causeway between the two. So they really are divided, and there probably wasn't that much activity going on then between the two. Like the two halves were almost independent of each other. I'm just sort of guessing that. So this is just part of the internal detail. The fuel tank ends up going here. There are machine guns mounted up here, and then the whole cockpit goes here. And the next sequence of things is to get all these tiny little bits put in. What color is 40? 40 is the gray. So again, yeah, so some of the metal bits are painted gray instead of metallic. But there's detail, really fine detail painting that needs to be done. That looks like it would better be done before it's cemented in rather than after. All these little bits here are supposed to be painted gray, because I'm thinking that the metal parts are not just polished metal. This is up here. This is painted gunmetal, which is a sort of a bluish silver color. But the metal parts are painted, and they're painted gray. I'm talking to myself, so I understand how these parts are supposed to look. So after they're primed, I will make sure that I get the colors right. Got about a half hour left. I'm going to paint these green. And I'm going to try to clean up some of this stuff. So what I'm going to be doing over the weekend is priming these pieces. Can you see them now? All right. Have fun tonight. Thanks for joining in, and I'll see you next week. Hopefully I'll have the paint color I need and I'll be able to start. Anyway, hopefully this will all work and I'll actually start to be able to paint and detail these folks here and finish the cart. So thanks for dropping in. I appreciate it. And I'll see you next week. Again, a reminder, I'm going from 10 until 1 instead of 2. No, don't do this. Put the brushes away. These have little tabs on the bottom. Number 14, they can only go on one side or the other. I better get them right. So 14, 15 is this one. Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Okay, I got it. Backward. This. Okay, so that's interesting. They go in like this. The tab goes there, but then the tab is visible. It's another one of those. It doesn't look really quite right like that. So after they're put on, I'm going to want to paint the tab. I don't know if I'm going to fill that gap in. I'd really like to fill the gap in. See the gap underneath where the radiator goes, where the little, can you see that? The tab doesn't fill that entire space. But the tab is definitely going to have to be painted the metallic color of the bracket. Otherwise, it just looks wrong. It's supposed to be sitting on there and not cemented on like a little piece of weird plastic. Okay, so it's a good thing I'm checking that. It's just one more of those little detail things that probably don't matter in the long run, but since I'm trying to do A-level work on this, right, and not B- level work, I am going to do my best to make those little details happen. But the tab, there is the only place this can be held while it's being painted. And so the alligator clip is going there. Trying to get it not on the place that's painted green. And it's important that it go on the right side. And so I need to put a label on this to tell me which is 1415 and which is 1617, just like the label I've got down there. Go in that hole. And what I'm hoping is that they don't pop off the alligator clip. And if they do, then further hope that I can find them. So I'm going to take these pieces, put them back in here. Those will get primed. I'm going to take those upstairs to the place where they get primed. and do this work in this little box, because hopefully then it's the pieces. This is the color. As you can see, the pigment and solvent have separated, so I'm going to get a lot of stirring going here. There's a little mixing ball in the inside of that, and I'm not hearing it rattling. So this is the relaxing, this is the painting part, relaxing painting today. After I prime, those pieces won't be an issue, but after I prime this, I may or may not end up messing around with those circles a little more. It depends on how they look with the paint on them. They're really pretty obvious now, but part of that is because the epoxy is clear and you can see through it into the place where it was applied. Anyway, there is a to be seen issue there, yet to be seen issue. But there's a lot of detail, especially on this bracket thing, that needs to be painted, and that's going to take a little while. I want to get those details right. Sometimes this shaking, good old-fashioned shaking, works just as well or better than that vortex spinner, especially with this color. Looks when it comes out. Yeah, it is not stirred. Okay, what I got was the dark green, but not the pigment. For some reason, this particular color is really bad at separating like that. I mean, it's a really useful color. It's called goblin green, but it isn't necessarily very goblin-y. Well, it's certainly getting a workout. But every time I've used it, it's been really badly separated like that. It takes a lot of shaking and stirring to get it mixed up, which is unfortunate because I'll end up talking about car parts again and things that need to be replaced, needed to be replaced on old vehicles that people don't even know that exist and sometimes don't exist anymore, like carburetors and distributor caps. This stuff is not wanting to become paint. Well, I still have 20 some minutes here. 25 minutes before the deadline. I don't want to abandon this color. Come on. Turn in, I don't need very much. Just turn into real paint. There we go. Okay. Almost, but not quite good. Good enough. So you can see the difference there. That's the color that comes out before it's mixed, and this is still not thoroughly mixed. I might have to, on my own time, come down and stir that for the better part of a month. What do I do with a little piece of toothpick with there? Put it there for now. Okay. Things are starting to fall on the floor. So there's detail on this as well. There's a little bracket there. It's not just the radiator part, but there's like a little bracket that looks like it needs detail painting. There's pigment or hardened pigment or something. Yuck. Looks like I got the sanding of the edges pretty well. The inside of that's a spot that would almost certainly be missed. I'm trying not to miss it. Smooth brush strokes. And there's always the opportunity to put on a second coat if necessary. Works when it tries, right? Right. Okay, well, it's got green paint on it. I have a kind of a greenish wash that I'm going to use on it that I think will make it look a little bit more aged so it doesn't look like brand factory new, okay, which it isn't supposed to be. Popping off. That's good. Is there something in? I don't know what that is. There's something in there. Maybe it's okay. It's like there's see it on one side. I don't know what that is. It looks like there's a piece of plastic kind of covering a part of that, but when I turn it over, oh, I see. It's just not even. The two sides aren't the same. To do about that. I have to look at it. I have to look at it on Monday and see if it looks okay. If not, I'll have to file that out and repaint it. I don't think the other one has that. No, actually, it does. Okay. Yeah, they're both the same that way. The two sides are not symmetric. All right, so they're painted. Look at them again on Monday to find out if I missed any spots. Or if what's going on there. It looked like there was something, like there was a hair or bristle or something there, but it looks okay. So yeah, I think I'm going to. I think there was again a little bit of like dried pigment or something on it. So I'm going to let these dry. It's kind of a cool color, but I'm going to use the green wash, the gray green wash, to see how it does in terms of highlighting some of the detail, like the little bracket and things on it, make it look a little bit weathered. This this dark green, and I think it would look okay on it. It's a little bit shiny, which, if these are in fact radiators, would be appropriate to have a little bit of gloss on it. All right. Still usable sandpaper back in the still usable sandpaper box. Put trash sandpaper here where I will throw it into the trash. This effort I made to clean things up just isn't working that well. So there's trash. There's a toothpick. There's goblin green paint. I'll just leave this out in case I need it. This is no longer necessary for this. I will keep this though. Oh, well. Yeah, I got a few minutes. I'm going to do that. Like with these little pieces, when they are primed, they tend to get knocked around. And so with the big one, I'm not too worried about that, but I might do that as well. What I like to do to keep that from happening is putting a little piece of tape down and folding it over. In this case, I'm going to use this tape because it tends not to pull the paint off. And just put some. I mean, everybody's done this, right? You just take the tape and you want it sticky on both sides, so roll it over on itself. Sticky on both sides. And then that holds the piece in. Okay. Nope, that's not done. We have a thing to do. You'll never guess. A mold mark circle. There. What can I say? It's like a coat of arms of manufacturing flaw. Okay. This isn't what I wanted to be doing, but if you can see it right there on the top is another one of those circles, circle of doom. And I want it to not be there, so I'm going to sand it out. seriously, I think, well, certainly with the hull where I filled them in, and I'm hoping that that they don't show that much once they're painted. I think at least, depending on the model, 25% of my time is spent trying to make circles, mold mark circles disappear. I'll look on the other side, make sure that there isn't a circle on the other side too. The ones on these parts, on this part and that part, were at least fairly easy to get rid of. This one seems to be lingering. Why is it lingering? It's like it's embedded in the plastic. It's not just a surface feature. To imagine circles now, there aren't any. Yeah, I'm glad I caught that before I bothered priming it, because then I'd have to sand it all out after it was primed. Not that that's a disaster, but it's just an annoyance. Okay. Having done that now, if I got, oh, yeah, I will do the right thing and get out a little piece of paper towel and some of the isopropyl alcohol and clean these parts before I take them up to prime them. Everything just sort of crowds in, right? It just crowds into this little area where I'm working instead of going back out of the way there. It's way too much. Getting to be sighing time. Time for sighing. Get that up, put it out of the way. Don't knock it over and spill all over. That would be a thing I would do. Breaking it, that was good. I didn't break it. The bottom of this theoretically doesn't show, but it will. So I'll paint the top and the bottom just to be sure. And all the little detail bits here that are metal that are painted, I'm going to paint those before this is installed. What I'm likely to do is paint the base coat of the wood color and then paint the gray parts and the gunmetal part, so that I can touch up if I get that paint onto the brown, I can touch that up. And then I'm going to use the brown wash, going to try anyway to just highlight the edges. I'm not sure if you know what that means, but I want it to look like wood. This needs to be painted bottom and top. I'm going to brush paint it because it is supposed to be wood, so it'll be kind of... Anyway, I hope it goes on smoothly. I hope the paint works nicely. And I keep bumping those, but they didn't spring off the... Yeah. Okay, I'm becoming incoherent. I am bumping into things. I am almost knocking stuff over. It is getting dangerous. I need to sneeze. Oh, sorry. I have made a mess of my work surface. I have done all the things that I need to do in order to have a successful, typical, accomplished virtually nothing today in 3 hours. I sanded down, I hope, effectively these little circles so that they don't show too terribly much. We'll find out. I got these painted, yay. And got these prepped. How could I use all of this time and accomplish so little? Once again, I do not know how I do that. I'm very, very skilled at getting nothing done. Yeah, there's little bits of detail on here that are going to be kind of challenging. I don't know if you can see it, but there's screws or rivets around this. So this is supposed to have a wooden frame with like a canvas interior. And those little sprockets there, I'm going to be painting metallic because they're obviously some sort of pass-through that isn't the leather. But then there's these little bitty points there that are rivet heads or nail heads. And I am going to make an effort to highlight those. I'm going to use, this is always a dangerous thing, I'm going to use a ballpoint pen, not a ballpoint, a felt tip pen with a really, really fine tip. And if I get it exactly on there, it'll put just a little bit of black ink on so it looks a little different than the rest. The downside of that is sometimes if I miss a little bit, cleaning that up is a problem. But it's something I'm going to try to do. No! Oh. Sorry. There's circles down here too. I'm going to go a little bit long. I want to be able to prime these, and I can't let that go. I'm really ticked. I should have seen those earlier, and I just didn't. And there's enough of them. It'll show. So you're all getting a treat here. You're getting an extra, I don't know, like 5 minutes or something. What is it? Oh, I still have time. My wall clock is 5 minutes fast. I really, 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 really don't like these little circles because they are so not right. They're not part of the model. Real things don't have these little arbitrary circles on them. And yet these models are made with these weird little arbitrary circles. There's a metal bracket on the other side, but is not how it's attached. I'm tempted to paint some of these things metallic, but they're not. They're in the plane. They're painted gray, which makes sense. You would paint your metal, especially with a seaplane that goes on the ocean with salt water all over it all the time. You wouldn't want exposed metal necessarily. So those where it says painted gray will get painted gray. What color is it supposed to be? I'm just digressing here. 19. That's desert yellow. No, it's 40. 40 is German gray. I think I bought German gray to make sure it was the right color rather than trying to substitute. Well, circles are gone. Plastic is polished. And then I will get the sanding dust off. Yeah, that was just annoying. I didn't see them the first time. I just need to do a better job of inspecting, I guess. There. Okay, once again, I am going to prime these parts. Okay, these are the parts that are going to get primed. And then on Monday, if Desert Tan shows up, not Desert Tan, Deck Tan, if Deck Tan shows up, I'll finish the cart. And then I should be able to start working on these parts, getting those painted. And then I'll also get these radiators. I'm going to put the wash on them to, like I said, highlight some of the detail that's on there, and so make sure that they're covered correctly. Okay, so these parts will be primed and ready to be painted next week. These will be ready to be washed, hopefully, to make them look a little bit better. Tabs have to be painted a different color. I might do that. I think I'm going to do that after I put them in. I'm going to assemble them first so that I can decide whether I want to do any kind of filling in or not. So thanks for watching. Thanks for seeing me accomplish. I just don't know why nothing seemed to have gotten done today. But that's typical, isn't it? Plug away for 3 hours and get like 40 minutes worth of work done, or at least that's how it feels. I'll be back on Monday at 10, going until 1, and maybe accomplishing something. Who knows? Things might get done. Maybe. Can't promise. See you then. Have a good weekend. Those of you who have good weekends, appreciate you dropping in. Those of you who are in chat, appreciate that as well. And I'm going to shut up now, stop babbling, and end the stream, and then it'll restart again for the next 24 hours the way things are going. Trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. Of course I'm forgetting something. I have to be forgetting something. It's the way it is. Yeah, I'm going to get these parts primed. There's a lot of detail, surprising amount of detail on these little pieces that I didn't realize was there at first. But I'm going to be plugging away at that next week. I have the colors for this anyway, so even if I can't get the cart done, except for just one piece in here, I should at least be able to get started on it. That'll be a good thing, getting started. See you on Monday. I'm going to say goodbye again. Thanks, everybody. See you at 10 with relaxing painting, and there will be painting. It might not be relaxing, but there will be painting on Monday. I can guarantee. See you then.